Welcome to Retrospective Rewinds, where history gets a second draft, and reality is only the beginning. In our world of what-ifs, we unravel the fabric of time and explore the most intriguing alternate realities and histories imaginable. From the might-have-beens to the never-wheres, we dive deep into the tales that history books didn't write. Before we step through the looking glass today, don't forget to hit like, share, and subscribe to join our community of curious minds and avid dreamers. Your support helps us bring more fascinating stories from the echoes of alternate timelines. In today's journey, we ask the question, what if World War II had ended differently? How would our maps look? How would nations align? And what new powers would rise from the ashes of the old world? Fasten your seatbelts, rewinders, as we embark on an odyssey to a 1945 where the Axis powers stand victorious, and the world as we know it has been reshaped by their hands. Now let the rewind begin. Chapter 1. The New World Order. The ink had barely dried on the documents that reimagined the world when the reality of the Axis victory began to dawn on the masses. Celebratory parades in Berlin, Rome, and Tokyo contrasted starkly with the somber mood in London and Washington. The treaties, punitive and precise, stripped the Allied powers of their colonies, resources, and pride. New countries rose from the ashes of war, with names unfamiliar to the tongue, flags unknown to the eye. The cartographers worked tirelessly, redrawing maps to accommodate the victors' whims. In the New World Order, languages changed in classrooms overnight, statues fell, and new ones took their place, all while the citizens looked on, a mix of fear, acceptance, and a flicker of defiance in their eyes. The world had turned, and the once great powers now faced an uncomfortable future under the watchful eyes of their conquerors, as the vanquished. Chapter 2. The Axis Hegemony. Under the Axis hegemony, a strict regime was quickly established. Cities were adorned with symbols of the new rulers. Eagles, suns, and swastikas stood prominent against the architecture of the old world. The leaders of this new order were unyielding, their visions for the future etched into the policies and laws that now govern daily life. Propaganda posters painted a picture of unity and strength, but beneath the surface there was a sense of unrest. The Axis imposed cultural assimilation, language standardization, and a curriculum that glorified their ideologies. The streets, patrolled by the military, were quiet, and the night curfews enforced silence after dark. It was a world of order, but also of silence. A silence that was enforced, not earned. Chapter 3. The resistance whispers of resistance began as mere murmurs in the shadows of this new world order. In clandestine locations, from the basements of Paris to the forests of Belarus, small groups gathered. These were the defiant who could not stomach the sight of their nation's flags replaced or their histories rewritten. They shared information in hushed tones, the spark of rebellion alive in their eyes. Their methods were primitive compared to the sophisticated surveillance of the Axis, but their resolve was unbreakable. Each act of sabotage, each piece of graffiti, each underground pamphlet was a blow to the regime, a statement that the human spirit could not be so easily conquered. Chapter 4. Life under the regime. Life under the Axis regime was a tale of two realities. In the cities, civilians marched to the beat of a new drum, their routines monitored and liberties curtailed. Yet there was a veneer of normalcy. Children went to school, markets opened, and workers headed to factories. But the normalcy was a facade, a thin veil covering the strict censorship and the ever-present fear of being denounced. The regime had eyes and ears everywhere. Neighbor watched neighbor, and even family members became suspicious of each other. It was a life of subdued whispers, where a careless word could mean disappearance. Despite this, life found a way. People adjusted to the new normal, finding solace in the small joys, clandestine book clubs, secret art viewings, and the subtle exchange of banned music that kept the embers of the old world alive. Chapter 5. The Economy Redesigned. In this new world, the Axis powers had reshaped the global economy to serve their grand vision. Industries once geared for war now produced goods that flowed through new trade routes, favoring Axis nations and their allies. Currency was reimagined. The Reichsmark, the yen, and the lira became dominant, while the pound and the dollar faded from international markets. The black market flourished, operating in the shadows of this new economic system. Here, scarcity bred innovation, and the currency of exchange was not always monetary. A barter economy emerged, trading in the rarest commodities of all, freedom and truth. Chapter 6. The Great Divide. The Great Divide was most palpable in the resource-rich colonies that had been annexed by the Axis. These lands, abundant in minerals and crops, were now the industrial heartlands, feeding the insatiable hunger of the victors. But prosperity did not touch everyone. The local populations toiled for meager wages while the Axis elite reaped the benefits. In the metropoles, skyscrapers rose and lights blazed throughout the night, while in the villages, families huddled in the dark, their futures as uncertain as the flickering candles that lit their homes. The divide was not just economic. It was etched into the very landscape, opulence shadowed by poverty, power juxtaposed with helplessness. Chapter 7. Silent Rebellion. Resistance took many forms, and in the world of art and culture, it was a silent rebellion. Forbidden jazz played in hidden basements, its rhythms a quiet challenge to the order. Paintings that subtly criticized the regime were displayed in private galleries, their messages encoded in brushstrokes. Literature became a haven for the defiant, stories and poems written in metaphor, their true meanings shielded from the eyes of censors. These works of art became the lifeline for a people starved of self-expression. Each note, each color, each word a muted battle cry against the oppressors. Chapter 8. The Puppet States. The so-called puppet states existed in a perpetual twilight of sovereignty. Their leaders, while outwardly loyal to the Axis, grappled with the internal conflict of their positions. Many sought to appease their overseers while secretly funding and aiding the resistance. In these states, a game of shadows unfolded, with each move on the political chessboard carrying the weight of entire populations. These nations' cultures were suppressed but not extinguished, simmering under the surface, waiting for a chance to re-emerge. Within the government, there were those who played their roles with a heavy heart, their smiles for the Axis cameras masking a deep-seated desire to see their lands free. And beneath them, the underground movements worked tirelessly, their efforts becoming more daring with each passing day, as they sought to reclaim the autonomy that had been stripped away. Chapter 9. The Iron Curtain Redrawn. The new Iron Curtain was not just a physical barrier, but a psychological one, separating families, friends, and ideologies. On one side, the Axis powers projected an image of strength and unity, while on the other, the subdued territories whispered of rebellion. Propaganda was the regime's chosen weapon, painting the lands beyond the curtain as chaotic and their leaders as villains. Yet, in the dead of night, defectors braved the no-man's land, seeking asylum and carrying with them tales of the other side. It was a world divided not just by concrete and barbed wire, but by the very notion of what it meant to be free. Chapter 10. Espionage and Intrigue. In a world dominated by the Axis, espionage became the lifeblood of both the regime and the resistance. Spies weaved their way through the societies of both friend and foe, their lives a constant dance on the razor's edge. Intelligence was the currency of survival, and those who could master the art of deception rose to prominence. Tales of daring operations circulated in hushed tones, of agents who infiltrated the highest ranks, of information that traveled through invisible networks, and of close calls that could have altered the course of this alternate history. Chapter 11. The Flickers of War. Though the Axis powers had won the war, peace was tenuous. In regions where borders had been redrawn, old grievances simmered, threatening to ignite new conflicts. Soldiers who had once fought for the Allies now found themselves under new flags, their loyalties tested. War games and military parades were the regime's display of might, but they masked the fear of insurrection. An incident at a border, a skirmish over resources, any spark could set the world ablaze once more. In this chapter of history, peace was not a state of being. It was a momentary pause in the unending cycle of human conflict. Military leaders on both sides knew the fragile nature of this peace, understanding that the true battle was for the hearts and minds of people. The world watched as these flickers of potential conflict were quickly extinguished by the regime's heavy hand. But the question remained: how long could force maintain the facade of peace before the desire for freedom erupted once again? Chapter 12. The Quest for Equilibrium. Neutral countries, spared the direct rule of the Axis, became havens of diplomacy and espionage. In this delicate environment, diplomats from both sides engaged in a complex ballet, balancing their nation's interests with the global need for stability. These countries became the breeding ground for a new kind of warfare, one fought with words and alliances rather than bullets and bombs. It was here that the seeds for a possible future peace were sown, as leaders from neutral territories met in secret with resistance members, hoping to tip the scales towards a world where war was no longer the arbiter of power. Epilogue: The world that could have been. As the narrative closes, the audience is left to ponder the repercussions of a world shaped by the Axis victory. We reflect on the resilience of the human spirit amidst oppression and the enduring quest for freedom. The story urges us to consider the threads of history, how they intertwine, and how easily they could have led to a different tapestry of human experience. The epilogue is a contemplative piece, musing on the nature of fate and choice, and the countless possibilities that lie dormant within our past, waiting for the slightest change to bring forth a new future.